On Friday, the University of Iowa became the first Big Ten school to discontinue sports programs due to the financial impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The school announcing it will no longer compete in men's gymnastics, men's and women's swimming and diving, and men's tennis after the conclusion of this upcoming school year. Iowa says it will honor scholarships for those student athletes through graduation. This is a reaction to projected lost revenue of approximately $100 million. Joining us now to talk more about this decision, the athletic director at the University of Iowa, Gary Barta. Gary, we're talking here about several sports that Iowa has been competing in for a century or more. What led you to the conclusion that this is what you had to do?
Well, first of all, if you'll give me just a minute, the conclusion I can speak to, but before I do, probably the two most challenging, gut-wrenching things that an athletic director has to deal with is the death of a student athlete or a group of students, and then right after that is dropping sports. And so it was a very, very challenging day on Friday, and since then it remains a challenge today. But in terms of how we got there, the finances, it's all about money. It's all about finances, and it's directly related to COVID-19. We would not be sitting here today talking about this at Iowa had the pandemic not hit and had we not postponed football in the Big Ten. That's just what led to this. And then the process of looking at our finances, the drop in revenue, over $100 million, not having football, cutting in every other place we possibly could first, and then the last resort, cutting sports. And then just going through that process, because we're going to have to, even with cutting sports, we're going to have to borrow, we're estimating around $75 million. And paying that back is going to take some time. And it just got to that point where there were no other alternatives. And so that's how we got there. And then, picking which sports, again, it's a no-win situation. So we had to go through that process as well.
Why these sports?
And so once we made the determination that we had to cut sports, we created a list of factors, criteria to consider. And no matter which sport we put, we looked at many different scenarios. And no matter which sports we put in the queue, we could make a case to keep that sport, cancel this one, throw this one back in. But at the end of the day, we picked the 4 sports that got us to the point where we feel most confident when we come out of the pandemic, and there will be an end to this. But when that occurs, the 4 sports we selected, to the best of our ability, met those criteria collectively, and will give us the best chance to pay back our loans, to come out of this with 20 sports instead of 24 and be strong in those 24 sports. And so comparing whether it should have been softball or baseball versus men's tennis versus swimming versus pick other sports, golf, women's gymnastics, men's gymnastics, no matter where we landed, if you try to pick one and compare it against another, it doesn't, you can make a case to not cut some that we did or cut some that we didn't. And at the end of the day, we picked the 4 we thought gave us the best opportunity to move forward once this pandemic lifts its ugly head and at least leaves at some level.
Can you foresee a situation down the line where when you have paid back the amount of money that you've said you will have to borrow to make things work at Iowa here going forward, that you could reinstate these sports?
I don't ever want to say never, but bringing sports back, I'll just speak from history. If you look across the country and across time, bringing back sports doesn't happen very often. So I don't want to create any false hope. I don't anticipate that happening, but again, I'm right now focused on what's happening today and the way when a crisis is occurring. That's sort of what you're looking at. I am looking ahead to make sure we come out of this crisis as strong as ever. But I don't see that happening in the short run, but I don't ever want to say never.
Gary, I'll leave you with this. It is a really challenging time. What is your message to Iowa fans and to a larger extent to Big Ten fans during this time?
Well, hurt and anger are natural. And, I'm feeling it sitting here in my office. I feel most most discouraged for our student athletes. I've had to deliver a lot of bad news lately to the sports we cut, to our fall sports when we postponed, all the way back to the basketball tournament when we weren't able to compete. And just saying, hang in there. We are part of an incredible conference. Eventually this will end. And when it does, I can't wait to get back into Kinnick Stadium and Carver Hawkeye Arena, and as fast as we possibly can. So again, to our student athletes, my heart goes out to them, and let's get this thing figured out and get back as fast as we can.
Gary Barta, the Fine Athletic Director at the University of Iowa, really appreciate your time. I know it's been a challenge for you. Thanks for giving us a few minutes.
Thanks, Dave, and just blessings, and let's keep working forward to all of us.
Thanks, Gary.